Hello, thank you for joining us today in our parent training. I am Lacey Conner. I am one of the RBTs for Carmen B. Pingree, and as an RBT, I specialize in ABA, which is an acronym for Applied Behavior Analysis, and it's one of the one-on-one therapies we do with the kiddos here. And so even though I'll be talking from an ABA context, this will be applicable to all human behavior and our kiddos who aren't enrolled in those one-on-one services. So let's get on with it. We are discussing the 4 functions of behavior. So as ABA practitioners, before we start doing our assessments, when we're observing behaviors, we try to break it down into what might be causing these behaviors, what the functions of these behaviors are, so that we can make the best intervention plan. Sometimes intervention plans can be less effective if we're trying to not get the cause of the behavior met. Basically, big behaviors happen when our wants and needs aren't being met. And sometimes our kiddos have problems communicating what their wants and needs are. And also as children, they're learning emotional regulation. So it's our job to step in and give them the benefit of our learned experiences. So the 2 potential problem behaviors we'll be talking about is yelling and running away. I chose these behaviors because they capture the fight or flight, especially with our children, their little bodies. Yelling might be their only way to communicate that something is very wrong, that there's something they very much need or want. And of course, these behaviors aren't always maladaptive. I run and yell when I'm having fun on the playground with them all the time, but we just need to make sure that they're having their behaviors in a socially acceptable situation. So before we do any sort of assessment, we need to check in with the medical care team. We need to rule out as mental health professionals if there are medical causes to issues. Some of our kiddos are on medications and coming back to the communication. Sometimes they can't tell us when they're in pain, if they have stomach aches or tooth aches, and some of our kiddos are going through puberty. So I know when I have a headache, the best behavioral intervention is Tylenol. We definitely want to be using all of our resources when we're checking in with our kiddos. So here they are, the 4 functions of behavior. My favorite acronym is Everybody Eats, because everybody has behavior. We have escape, attention, tangible, and sensory. And we'll go through these one-on-one in context with the problem behaviors we identified earlier. First up, we have escape, any behavior that primarily happens to avoid, delay, or end something unpleasant. For this scenario, let's say we're at the dentist office. It can be really scary, and there are a bunch of unpleasant noises and sounds, and sometimes we just don't like going to the doctor in general. So if we get to an escalated yelling behavior, we always want to try to encourage functional communication. If we can enter into any sort of negotiation stage at this point, then everybody wins. We also want to remind them of expectations. Yelling isn't okay in this context, and it's okay to be afraid, and here's something else we can do. And then, of course, we have running away. So when they are trying to escape, they just need to get out of there. What we want to do is teach them that this isn't something that they have to avoid or that they can necessarily avoid. I mean, we do have to go to the doctor. So maybe we can step it back to an easier behavior. Maybe we can wait in the waiting room. Maybe before we show up to the dentist, we can run through what the dentist office will be like. We can play pretend. And then we really have to ask ourselves when we have any kind of escaping or eloping behavior, running away, is our child's safety at risk? We definitely want to weigh the demand versus how extreme our child's reaction is going to be. So next, I have attention. Any behavior that occurs when someone desires a response from another person. We're very social. We need people in order to survive, but you can't yell all the time. So I like to say, "Oh, sorry, I can't hear you when you're yelling. And we'll model behavior of effective communication. We will want to try our best to withhold negative or positive attention in either behavior because we don't want to create a learning history that your concerns get acknowledged when you're yelling. We want kind, soft voices. And for running away, this is so tricky when it's attention-based because they're trying to get a rise out of you, right? They're trying to run and play tag. So in the moment, do your very best to run when they're not looking and look disinterested when they try to look back and see what your reaction is. Positive or negative might still give them the reinforcement that they're getting what they want. And so it's after the behavior and the debriefing, we go over, that wasn't safe, and we can offer them alternatives. And so I have play together as a behavior we can do before we get to the place where we're running away. Next, I have tangible, any behavior exhibited for the purpose of gaining access to something physical. So food, snacks. But also iPads are a really big deal in Pingree. And sometimes you just can't have access to your iPad. So when we get to a yelling behavior, we want to give them a quick reminder. This isn't how we get what we want. We want to try to nip a behavior in the bud before it escalates. And we also want to reward functional communication. That's always a big win in our book. When we see a running away behavior, we're going to want to secure the items to make sure that they can't access the item that they can't have without our permission, because then they learn they can be all reckless and wild to get to the thing that they want. And next, I have a visual schedule for explaining when the item will be available. We need to teach them the skill of, delayed gratification, and we just want to set them up with as many tools and skills as possible to get their wants and needs met. And our fourth one is sensory or automatic behaviors. These things are reinforcing without any sort of learning history. They're eating when you feel hungry. They're a nice room temperature space. But also some of our kids have automatic sensory needs of stemming, which are vocalizations or body movements that are sort of compulsory. And we do not want to get rid of these behaviors. These behaviors are necessary, they're needs. So what we need to make sure that we do is teach them how to get those needs met in all environments. For yelling, we can practice quiet versus loud. You can still make sounds, but we're loud outside and we're quiet inside. And that's something they just have to make those noise. But also we sometimes have sensory needs that are overwhelming. Maybe the lights are too bright, or there's an odd noise, or maybe that tag in our clothes is just driving us wild, and it just builds and builds and builds until we get to a place where we're yelling. So we can, as adults, take care of that and teach them the skills. Next, we have running away. So sometimes things can't be avoided, and we can slowly build up their tolerance to the sensory input. Like lights are going to be on in our friends' houses. Sometimes there'll be noises we can't control. And I think also the intervention with the headphones and sunglasses, any tool we have will help us keep the behaviors from rising to a crisis situation. And so something we could do before running away is just exercise. Sometimes it just feels good to run. And of course, we're going to come back to the rule out medical causes. This is huge. We definitely want to make sure we're taking care of the bodies of our kids as well as growing their minds. And so now that we've discussed our 4 functions of behavior, let's talk about why we would try to focus on identifying the causes, because a lot of these suggestions kind of sounded the same, right? We want functional communication. We want to lower the intensity of the behavior. We want to offer things before the behavior happens, things after the behavior happens. But does anyone have any ideas why, say for instance, we wouldn't want to lower the difficulty of a task if someone were just trying to get our attention? I don't know. Maybe that question was a little too leading, but if they learn that they can act up, they can get our attention and also get away with something, I would find that incredibly reinforcing. Also, I can think of another of for escape, maybe we wouldn't want to maintain a neutral affect. Maybe as an antecedent, we could be reassuring. We could be, this is a safe place. But we definitely don't want to become escalated with our kids. That might be the end of my time. Maybe we can leave YouTube comments.